to like and subscribe to Miniature Dork Universe.
Shit, nobody likes that crap, do they?
Failure to like and subscribe results in head loss.
What the fuck, man?
Hello everyone, welcome back to another fun-loving round of Miniature Dork Universe, where we try to bring the hobby time success stories. Today's video is going to be on how I make these cypress trees. I'm doing them for a 12mm scale, but you can use them for 15mm too. Anything above that though, they're looking kind of small. So I can show you just by comparison. This is what it would be like against a 1/7/2 scale, which, as you can see, they're looking pretty small. So they could be smaller cypress trees, but they typically grow. Mature cypress tree grows between something like 33 and 70 feet. So here it is beside a 15mm guy. It's looking pretty good with 15mm. So this tallest one here is 10 centimeters. So in 15mm, I think that would be like 32 feet or 10 meters. 15mm is pretty easy to figure out because it's 1/100. So yeah, you're looking at about I think it's 33 or 36 feet. And in 1/144 scale, which is the 12mm, that would be about a 50 or 60 foot tall tree, maybe even closer. Yeah, that would be like your maxed out height for a cypress tree. So yeah, I'd say for 15mm or 12mm, or even 10. I have some 10mm figures and they're the same size as the 12mm, so whatever. You can build these trees and use them. Here they are in the Italian countryside. So the thing about these trees that I kind of like is here you can see, you can buy them for like, buy 3 shitty looking ones for $20, or you can make a bunch of this. I just use leftover sprues. So I'll show you how I taper the sprues, and the actual bark area of the cypress tree that's showing is very minimal. So I texture the trunk so it looks like tree trunk, and then the rest you just leave and glue a bunch of this pine color foliage. You could go with a lighter color too. It's just from a distance they always seem to be quite dark, but up close they can seem to be quite light too. So yeah, you can use your own artistic license there, but I like the dark look, so that's what I went with. Our first step in creating these trees is to get some pieces of sprue that are roughly the right size and the right diameter. Well, diameter isn't important really, unless your sprue is super thick, but I don't think any of our stuff is coming on super thick sprues. So just out of the spare parts, find some sprue, and with some snips, just start snipping off the sections. This is a good long piece. Just like that. Way better than forking out $20 for 3 trees. Now, yeah, I would say 10 centimeters is probably the maximum you'd want to go. Like I said, that'd be about a 60-foot tree in 1/144 and a 36-foot tree in 15mm, which is getting to the upper, like the max height of these trees. So for 12mm, I'm thinking that 10 centimeter was looking a little high. So what I might do is cut one off at 6 and then use the remainder for a smaller tree, which would end up being about, once I cut it down, it'd probably be about 42 centimeters. I'm going to flatten off the ends so they'll glue to a base. For the next step of our cypress tree fabrication fun, we're going to take a dremel tool such as this. and we're going to put the sprue in the shank, and then with sandpaper start to taper it. What I would recommend that you do is to wet the sandpaper though. If you wet the sandpaper, you're not going to have a giant cloud of plastic dust going into your lungs. So yeah, he who shall live by the plastic shall die by the plastic, but not necessarily. Just put some water on use the wet dry sandpaper. So I've wet the sandpaper, and I'm going to put the plastic in the shank and make sure there's enough in there so that it gets a good purchase. And just make it nice and tight. Now, here's the thing. If you just start going la 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 like that, it's going to fucking break right off the bat. And if you turn on the Dremel too high, because the engine, you know, it doesn't have like a, especially this one here, I'll put it on a little bit. It's kind of old and rickety, so it's wobbly. If you go, see how the tip is wobbling? If you put that on high speed, that's just going to compound. It's also because this isn't perfectly round, right? So the weight is causing it to wobble. It's just going to break and fly off. So what you need to do is hit it on a nice low speed and use your finger as a guide to keep it from wobbling. 180 is a good grit to use. So as you go, keep checking the taper. These things are quite spear shaped, they're quite pointy, so make sure your taper is nice and pointy. Yeah, and then once you get it to a level that you like, you know, on to the next. So you flip that sucker out and flip this sucker in. Gotta do some of that sucker flipping. There, and then repeat. So I'm going to repeat this. I'm sure you guys don't need nor want to watch me do all of these. Get your bloody sandpaper and get going. And we'll meet back when we have all of our tapered bits. The next step will be to flatten off the other end that you're going to stick to a base. And these trees stand pretty straight, so you want to get a fairly square bottom on it. But there's a lot of stuff left at the bottom from the clippers. I will use a hobby knife to start it off and then file. If you spin it as you file, you'll get a straighter filing line. Doesn't have to be obviously perfect. Nothing is in nature, but we're going for the straightest standing that we can possibly achieve. I haven't seen any pictures of cypress trees that lean. Any of these weird little anomalies left from the sprue, cutting off all the other little sprue gates, leave it. It ends up looking kind of cool, like knots in the tree and stuff. We're just going to put in our wood texture at the bottom portion of the tree. I do this by carving out little divots from the plastic, and I keep spinning as I cut, and that'll give you more random natural shapes. Only a little portion on the bottom is required in order to get your tree trunk. We have our trunk bases sort of notched out, and the next step is I'm going to take this half round file and just do some random filing. Again, I'm spinning it and just filing it like so. And that is just going to add to our natural shape. It might take some of the extreme edges off some of the knife cuts, although those extreme edges aren't particularly bad. You could probably skip this step, but you know what? I don't think it hurts. And I find that my homemade wood trunks end up looking pretty good using this method. So I just keep going with what I know works. To get the wood texture, I'm going to use this fun-loving razor saw, and I'm going to spin it around and just go. I think this razor saw might be a bit too, if you have a saw like this, get the finer blade. I think it comes with, it's the X-Acto saw, it comes with 2 thicknesses. This one I have the more intense blade for cutting through stuff faster. But I also have a jeweler saw, and this is a heavy tooth blade for a jeweler saw, but it's the spacing of the teeth is nicer, I think, for this scale to get wood texture. And I'm kind of spinning it as I do this too, just so that our lines aren't totally straight up and down. But the way they travel against these notches and things, even if you're going straight up and down, it's not going to appear as such. See, like, there's a little air bubble in this. I don't know if I can focus it in this. It just looks natural. You know, I left it in. It looks pretty good. And go around. Now, if you don't, there's a bit of fluff left on this. If you don't like it, just use some model, like liquid cement, and that'll take it out. But I leave it. It actually looks kind of flaky like bark when you paint it up. Now, you're also going to need a super turbo wanky Martha Stewart little glue gun. You could probably do this with super glue. Just have a pool of super glue and stick the foliage in that and then stick it to the thing. You'll get an instant bond, and that should work out. However, it's going to use a lot of glue. So if you don't want to waste your super glue, then the super turbo wank Martha Stewart freaking glue gun. I got this one, you know, at a Walmart or something for 10 bucks. I think they had the same one in dollar stores for 10 bucks. When's the last time something was actually $1 in the dollar store? Anyway. And then, of course, you're going to need your foliage. So I have this Woodland Scenics Dark. And it's fairly, it's clump, but it's not really big clumps for whatever reason. But it's good sort of coniferous color, that dark. And I'm going to pour some in a bucket for this, because we don't want to piss around with a bag and static electricity while we're trying to select the right pieces. And what I do with this fun-loving thing is I'm going to start at the top. So put a little dab of your glue in the top, and then I'm going to spear some, well, I thought I was going to spear some. I'm going to spear some of the foliage right onto it. And as you'll notice, there's these little strings, obviously, with glue gun. Yep, for each step of the way, I'm going to pick that shit off. And I would do that each step of the way. Because if you save that for the end, you're going to have a big mess. And you're not going to be too chuffed. So that will be my first. Foliage has been stuck on, and I've just attached them to round bases. You might want to use a base that's a little bit more natural looking than just round, but I'm gonna blend these in with my ground pretty closely, so I don't think it's such a big deal in my case. But depending on how you're gonna put these on the on your table, I mean, obviously. And I didn't bother. Usually with trees I weigh them down, but because these are relatively small, they're not too easy to knock over. So I'm just gonna leave them, you know, by the time the groundwork is on, they'll be a little bit base heavy. So the next step, I've got most of the threads of hot glue off. Now I'm just going to hit it with heat gun. It's kind of big to put in the camera, but I'm going to use the heat gun to melt off any other strands, or sometimes if the glue gets disrupted while you're placing the foliage, it will kind of form sort of these little white crusty bits. This will take off the white crusty bits. I'm going to zoom out here so I can show you the essential thing here is that you apply good heat gunnery. If your heat gunnery sucks, you're going to melt your tree that you just spent a little bit of time forming up nicely. So you might ask, how do I become a good heat gunner? And my answer to that is to actually have your hand where you're heat gunning. So it allows you to gauge the temperature. If it's going to cook your hand, it's also going to cook your piece. So by increasing the distance or how far away, you'll get it just to that right point. And it shouldn't burn the shit out of your hand. It should feel hot, obviously, but it's not, you know, you don't want it to the level where, you know, you're screaming in pain. That's only for Thursday night in Munich. Ha ha. Here we are not trying to feel the pain, unfortunately. So let's begin. Heat gun, I'm just going to use the lowest setting too. I'm going to give this a further coat of adhesive. I'm going to use Mod Podge watered down, and I'm going to hit the tree first with this flow improver that I've mixed with water. It's what you're supposed to do. If you've seen my videos before, you've seen me use this, but it's this Liquitex flow improver. So there's 1 drop of this per every 20 drops of water, so you get quite a bit of it. And it's really good. It's for acrylic, but it works with anything water-based. It basically just takes the surface tension off the water. And it's cool. You can make your own washes with it. So I usually use like decent quality acrylics, like a Vallejo or some artist acrylic if I'm doing a wash. Water it down, and then when you hit it with some of this, you can literally see the surface tension of the water break. And that's what this does. I don't know what's in it. Probably the stolen prayers of orphan children or something horrendous, but doesn't seem to be too toxic. But yeah, it breaks down the surface tension so that it improves the flow, hence flow improver. So you'll take your tree as such and just give it a spray of flow improver all around. And then I'm just going to use a little eyedropper like this and just start dropping your Mod Podge, and you'll see that it soaks in. If you weren't using the flow improver, you would probably need to use a lot more of this Mod Podge because it wouldn't want to soak in. It would just sort of roll off. And after you put some on, you can add some more flow improver, and it'll just keep carrying it through. And that's it. You just hit it like that and wait for it to dry. While the extra glue is drying on the foliage, we'll put down the groundwork. So once again, I'm going to use my home paint swatch that I use with all my cheapy acrylics and just match it up against my my gaming mat that I have. And when I look at it, there's a bit of an orangey tone in some of the darker areas, so I'm not going to go super crazy. I think I'll go with this honeycomb color, and then it looks like this suede color will sort of blend in well, and I'll do my high highlights with the buff color, and we'll see how it goes. We might modify it down the line. I'm going to put a bunch of green fine foliage down too to make it look like the low sort of vegetation. I may have done this before on one of my previous videos, but here, we'll bloody do it again. I'll show you how I mix up my basing material. So I start off with an empty Tamiya paint jar, as such. This had a different color groundwork in it. It was all used up, but there was some of it left. I just rinsed it out. There's still some in there, but I'm not going to worry too much about it. I start off with this stuff. It's called Celluclay. I bought it back in the 90s, and it used to fill up this coffee tin. So this is how much I've used in 30 years. Holy shit, man. So yeah, it lasts a long time. It's just a paper mache compound. I stuck it in this coffee tin because it wasn't a bag. And the bag is smaller than the coffee tin. It's just compressed in the bag. When you open it up, it all poofs out. So I take a pinch of that and stuff it in the Tamiya bottle, and that just gives it a bit of body, you know, and the body has a bit of texture too, so it creates like a bit of a paste, but it has a texture. Then I have some sand here. I'll hold it like this so you can see, that I've just collected from the beach. And I just use my scooper and put a couple scoops of sand in. Kind of got it all over the place like a dick, but hey, what can you do? And then I have some model railroad ballast. It's two different colors mixed together. Just again for a bit more texture, I'm going to throw a bit of that in. It also, some of the colors will sort of remain through, which is nice. Gives it a bit of color variation. And then I'll put in some of this, which is Liquitex ceramic stucco. So it's like that acrylic gel I use, but it has like a sort of pumicey texture to it. This will make this dry out very plasticky, which is nice. It handles washes better, and it's fairly tough. So I take about that much for something this size. Hopefully it's in focus. And we'll just slap it there for now. Then I'm going to use this color for my sort of base color. It's called honeycomb. I use an eyedropper to introduce the water so that you don't overdo it. And then I'm going to just mix it in. So it's already the color that we're going to use. And you want it to be about like oatmeal, I guess. And then it's ready to go. Just like that. So now we'll just take our trees, which are still kind of wet from the glue layer, but I thought it's a good time to put this basing material on because it does take a few hours to dry properly. So might as well base it up and get two birds with one stone. And then it'll all be dry at the same time and we can continue working. Another thing you want to do when you're applying your groundwork, especially as the scales get smaller, is you want to kind of flatten it out. It looks bad if there's too many peaks in it, so use the tool to sort of smooth it out, and any like really extreme peaks, sort of pad them down. Those peaks don't look very realistic, but sort of undulating unlevel ground looks very realistic. So you want to go for that, but not for this crazy, like, you don't want it to look like someone stuck mashed potatoes on it. That's the way I view it. Like, if it has that sort of mashed potato-y look, then you want to sort of smooth it down. At this point, I'll drive in some of my rocks that I'm going to use. Also, I'll have a look at the trunk if I got too much of that stuff on the trunk. I'm just going to brush it off with a paintbrush. And it is acrylic, so you can just wash it off in some regular water. But I'm going to take a couple different kinds of decorative stones just to kind of, I have an old Flames of War book somewhere. Not a book, it's like a PDF. And it shows some stuff based for Monte Cassino, which is very mountainous. But the bases are quite rocky, and I sort of like that look. So I'm going to kind of emulate that a little bit. And the rocks are very light color here. They're almost white, like a very light gray. So they'll end up being painted, but I'm just going to, for now, to get them started, I have some of these larger sort of jagged rocks, and then these smaller, smoother rocks. The smaller, smoother ones are actually like silver in color, but I'm going to paint the stones slightly different. And yeah, and so here, you can see I just stuck them down to the base. Maybe I'll put a renegade over here. Okay, so groundwork is in place. This is all kind of wet. There's still like wet glue in the foliage. It's drier up top, but wetter near the bottom. But it will feel very plasticky when that's dry. And then of course the groundwork is fresh. So as I was saying before, what you want to do with your groundwork, because there's, if you got leftover in your jar, because there's paper mache in there, it will mold. Like, I've opened it once before and there was big white balls of mold in it, which was kind of a surprise. Plus I just wanted to do some basing, and then I had to like clean it all out and make it again. So the antidote to that, this says 70% alcohol, but it's actually 90. I just recycled the bottle with the sprayer in it. So I give it a few good sprays of 90 degree, a few good sprays of 90% alcohol, and then the lid goes on. And nothing's gonna grow in that shit unless it's from another planet. Well, and we are in the Miniature Dork Universe, so you never know what you're gonna get in this weird place. So yeah, we'll let that dry, and then we'll come back when it's time to paint. Now that our ground layer is dried, I'm gonna go in and with this Vallejo German camouflage dark green, I'm just going to find any areas where you can see like shiny bits of the hot glue, and just paint those out. And have a quick look over and dab paint anywhere where I see any shiny spots, or if sometimes there's little white spots from the glue as well, if it got sort of distressed as it was being worked on. And the paint will dry nice and matte. Now I'm just using the original honeycomb color to touch up any areas that didn't get covered when I put the groundwork on. And I've painted all the rocks the honeycomb color too. I'm going to use different grays for the rocks, like the bigger rocks, but I'm going to paint it with the overall base color first. In case I miss any spots, it'll sort of blend in with the ground a bit better. So I'm going to do all of that, and then we'll come back to paint the trunks. That'll be the next step. Now we'll move on to the actual trunks of the trees. For that I'm going to use this cinnamon color. So the bark for these cypress trees does seem to be pretty brown, but also kind of gray too. So I'm going to put on the first layer with just this straight up cinnamon brown. I'm still using a crappy brush. I recommend using your old crappy brushes for terrain because the bumpy sort of rough nature of terrain is going to ruin the tips of your brushes, so don't use your good brushes for this kind of stuff. You'll just so yeah, just a quick like that. So when that's dry, I'm gonna mix in slate gray with the brown and make like a brownish gray. It'll be mostly this with a tint of this to tie it in with the brown underneath. While the tree trunks are drying, I'm going to paint some of the larger rocks on the base. And I'm just going to use a few different colors. Sometimes I'll just use one color and mix in black or gray or something, but in this case I have these out. So one is smoke, one's cobblestone, and one's the slate gray that I'm going to mix in for the bark. And I'm just going to randomly go through and paint these stones. These colors are nice and light, and then I'll dry brush them with white later. The rocks that I look at in pictures of Italy often look to be like a lighter color of stone. So that's what we're going for here. So I'm going to go through and paint all these in, and then we'll dry brush, or no, then we'll do our wash, and then we'll dry brush in the tree trunks. Alright, I've quickly just painted in these rocks, not super carefully because there's going to be a wash and some dry brushing going on. So now we'll dry brush the trunks. So in a palette, like so, I'm just going to take, I'll start with the gray. Put a good blob of gray in. We don't need to make a lot of this color because dry brushing isn't going to use up too much paint. The other thing I would say about these cheapy craft paints too for terrain is that two things. They're quite cheap, but also the range of colors is infinite. They have so many colors, which is good. It's nice to have a bunch of different grays and browns and tans and things to work with for ground work. So I'm just gonna piss this off out of the picture for now, and I'm gonna grab a rag. So I usually wipe off the paint and then I do a few swipes on the rag to get some of the paint off, and then I'm just going to go across the trunk, and that should pick up the wood texture. I was going to do a wash first and I didn't. Oh well, we didn't do a wash first. If this looks good, we won't even bother with the wash on the trunk. We'll just put it on the groundwork. Yeah, I think that'll be satisfactory. For the wash, I'm going to use this Vallejo Burnt Umber. I put it in a clean part of my palette here. I've watered it down. And then I'm going to hit it with the Flow Improver mix from before. And I don't know if you'll be able to see this in the camera, but when I spray it in, like you see the surface tension, the water just drops down into the bowl. The surface tension instantly disappears, and that's sort of what we're going for. Because that's what prevents it from flowing nicely. So when you put the Flow Improver in, all of a sudden it does flow nicely. And that's how we want it to be. So I'm just going to spread this over the rocks and the groundwork. It looks fairly extreme when it's wet, but it'll tone down a bit when it's dry. The colors I chose that blend in with my gaming mat are the one that's on the base, which is this honeycomb, suede, and natural buff. So I'm going to start with this, and then probably this, and then the lighter color is the natural buff, which will be last. And then the rocks are just going to get a straight up white. Again, I just dip my brush in. For this, you can keep more paint on the brush. I'm just going to go through and dry brush the original color back down. I'm going to avoid hitting my rocks though. We're going to leave those their own sort of color. Next I'm going to put on this suede color. Just go a little bit lighter on the brush, just because it's quite a light color compared to what's before it. Come on, focus. Focus on the fucking natural buff. Anyway, I'm sure you know what a bottle of natural buff paint looks like. And I'm going to very lightly go around with that and maybe get some of that on the gray rocks that I did. Just very high highlights. Okay, the natural buff is down, and the last I'm going to hit these rocks with some straight up white, or it's kind of an off-white, light antique white. Just a very light dose of that. And then we're getting close to the end of the project. Fuck yeah! Fuck yeah! Fuck yeah! Fuck yeah! Something I usually do, which I forgot to do here, is the same glue, watered down glue that I put on the foliage, which makes it nice and plasticky and tough. I usually put that around the rocks after all this is dried, just to give the rocks a little bit of extra seat, or a little bit of extra strength, and I didn't this time, so one of my rocks did fall off, but I just simply glued it back into place. Okay, to put the foliage on, this is like the fine turf. I've mixed two different colors of green just to give it a bit of depth. There's some kind of shit floating around in here. We'll get him out so he doesn't end up on our freaking trees. And I'm going to use Mod Podge. Just the lid, this crusty foil thing. And I'm going to stipple the glue around the base, concentrating kind of around the rocks. It looks good when the foliage is there, and just little bits, again, to emulate how it sort of falls on my gaming mat. So not like overboard, but maybe not underboard either. Kind of around the stem. And then just dunk it in there, knock it around. Et voila. Okay, so I have the fine turf on, and I'm just going to strategically place some of these bits of foliage, like the clump foliage. So to do that, I put a little drop of super glue here, and I'm just going to like strategically place on a few bits. So use some small tweezers, get them on. I usually like sticking that right near the piles of rocks. It looks like bushes sort of growing up in behind there. So I'm going to go around and put those on here and there, and then, you know, I'll show you the final product. So yeah, I'll take some photos of these. I don't have anything to show it against that's complete. These are my first 12mm projects right here. So you'll see my Italy stuff unfolding as I go. So that will wrap up this round of Miniature Dork Universe. So thank you for watching, and I hope this helps you get some cypress trees if you want. If you want to do it in a larger scale, I think this works pretty well up to 15. But if you wanted to do like 172 or bigger, I would just use like shish kebab skewers or something, and maybe you can stick that in the shank of something and taper it. You really need to taper it though to get the spear shape of the tree. So yeah, if you can figure out a way to taper something larger, you can just do a very similar thing. Anyway, like I said, that's it. So we'll see ya. Stick around for the next round of Miniature Dork Universe. Thanks for watching. From your suffering enemy,